Good morning, guys. I decided not to wear makeup today. I just put on a little concealer because of my dark circles. But I don't want to. I don't know if I want to keep up that habit because it's expensive, and since I'm not going to really, I need to be very attentive to my spending. And then yesterday I got hit with a Sandag letter that stated that I did not pay the fee on the 8th of November. This is not true because I always stop. I always stop and pay that with my card. So I have documentation that it was paid. But it just kind of gripped me because, well, they said that they sent me a letter in November. I didn't receive a letter in November. Excuse me. And the second thing is, it's $107 now. And if it's not paid by the 4th, then it will be, they can put a hold on my registration. That being said, I'm leaving it in God's hands. I will pay it if I have to. But that just really discouraged me because I wouldn't do that. And it's not, I mean, I'm sure they can see the cameras. They say they have the cameras, right? They know very well that I did not just drive through that. I stopped, and I do recall that day because I remember it kept saying accepted, and the light wouldn't turn green. And I did my card, and then I just had to end up going. I was sitting there for a while, sitting there for a few minutes at least. So anyway, we'll let that go there. I wanted to read an excerpt from The Power of Prayer in a Believer's Life this is a book of Charles Spurgeon. Remember that intercessory prayer is the sweetest prayer God ever hears. Do not question it, for the prayer of Christ is of this character. In all the incense that our great God, or that our great high priest now puts into the censer, there is not a single grain that is for himself. His work is done, his reward obtained. Now you do not doubt that Christ's prayer is the most acceptable of all the supplications. Thus, the more your prayer is like Christ's, the sweeter it will be. And while petitions for yourself will be accepted, yet your pleadings for others, having in them more of the fruits of the Spirit, more love, perhaps more faith, certainly more brotherly kindness, will be as the sweetest sacrifice that you can offer to God. Remember, again, that intercessory prayer is exceedingly prevalent. What wonders it has wrought. Intercessory prayer has stopped plagues. It moved the darkness that rested over Egypt, drove away the frogs that leaped upon the land, scattered the lice and locusts that plagued the inhabitants of Zoan, removed the thunder and lightning, stayed at the ravages that God's avenging hand did upon Pharaoh and his people. We know that intercessory prayer healed diseases in the early church. We have evidence of it on old Mosaic times. When Miriam was smitten with leprosy, Moses prayed, and the leprosy was removed. Intercessory prayer has raised the dead, for Elijah stretched himself upon the child 7 times, and the child sneezed, and the child's soul returned. As to how many souls intercessory prayer has instrumentally saved, only eternity shall reveal it. There is nothing that intercessory prayer cannot do. Believer, you have a mighty engine in your hand. Use it well. Use it constantly. Use it now with faith, and you shall surely prevail. Perhaps you have a doubt about interceding for someone who has fallen far into sin. Did you ever hear of men who have been thought to be dead while yet alive? Have you never heard some old-fashioned story of one who was wrapped up in his shroud to be put into his coffin, and yet he was but in a trance and not dead? I cannot vouch for the accuracy of those tales, but I can tell you that spiritually there has been many a man given up for dead who was still within reach of grace. I am one. God found them and took them out of the horrible pit and out of the miry clay, yes, setting their living feet upon his living rock. Never give up. Never give up. Anyone who are spiritually dead until they are laid out for dead naturally. But perhaps you say, I cannot pray for others, for I am so weak, so powerless. You will gain strength by the exercise. But besides, the prevalence of prayer depends not upon the strength of the man who prays, but upon the power of the argument he uses. If you sow seed, you may be very feeble, but it is not your hand that produces the harvest. It's not our hand that produces the harvest. It is the vitality of the seed. Lord, we know it's not our hand that produces the harvest. It is the vitality of your seed. And you are the one that waters it, God. You are the one that brings it forth to life. And so in the prayer of faith, when you complete a promise and drop that prayer into the ground with hope, your weakness shall not make it miscarry. It shall still prevail with God and bring down blessings from on high. Job came from the dunghill. Job came from his dunghill to intercede, and so may I come from my couch of weakness. You come from your poverty to intercede for others, and so may we. Elijah was a man of like passions, weaknesses, and tendencies to sin. But he prevailed. And so shall you if you are not negligent in these exercises, but you pray much for others, even as Job prayed for his friends. Let me read that again because this is powerful. Because a lot of times we put a lot of weight on the old prophets of old, the men and women in the Bible, and we seem to somehow think that they were different than us. They were holier. They were like spiritual giants. And so, and even some may even think they could never be like that. Excuse me. But we have to remember, and I think my pastor touched on it on Sunday, is that David, Jacob, these men of God, you know, were not without fault. They were not without human weaknesses. So it says here, Elijah was a man of like passions, weaknesses, and tendencies to sin, but he prevailed. So we have to continue. And then I'll read one more excerpt, but I will go ahead and end this video here just in case you need to go. Thank you for listening, and of course, I will continue.